I think it's a pretty easy question, but the thing is that if it's a bad idea to raise everyone's taxes, why would it be a good idea to raise some? Well, he said, well, they're rich people. Rich people have too much money. Well, that's sort of a casting of aspersions. That's a moralizing. That's a moral judgment that you've made that because your neighbor's got a bigger house, somehow they don't deserve it. Because your neighbor's got 3 cars, they don't deserve it. It's a moralizing, but that's not the way an economist would look at this. The other problem with it is that they say, well, there's only a few rich people and they can afford it. Well, the thing is that a few people pay most of the taxes in our country. The top 1 or 2% pay about half of all the taxes. So when you say, I'm only going to raise taxes on rich people, you're talking about raising taxes on 50% of the nation's income. So it's an enormous amount of income. $800 billion is what he started out in his campaign saying he wanted to raise. He upped that once he won the election. He says he wants $1.6 trillion. Well, if you raise it on everyone, it's $2 trillion. It's a lot of money. But you're taking it from what I call the productive sector, the private sector, and you're sending it to the non-productive sector, the government sector. There are 2 reasons why I call government the non-productive sector. One is because Milton Friedman said, and I truly believe this, and I think it has a basic truism that's hard to deny, is that nobody spends someone else's money as wisely as they spend their own. I consider myself to be a good public servant, but I can never feel the pain of making a payment the way you do on your individual mortgage. You're going to be wiser with your spending of your family income than I could ever be because you had to work for it, and you're going to suffer the repercussions. To politicians, $1,000 is not much different than $1 billion than $1 trillion. We have trouble conceiving of these numbers. They're so good, but we cannot be good stewards because it's not directly our money. So we should try to minimize what we do, meaning most of it should be left to you. Does that mean no government? Yeah, we should have government, but we should always try to minimize it because we are the inefficient sector, you are the productive sector. There's another way of looking at this too, which is a little more of a liberty-minded message. Thomas Paine wrote that government is a necessary evil. And you say, well, gosh, that sounds so radical to be a necessary evil, to say government is evil. Well, what he meant by that is for every ounce of government you get, you give up an ounce of freedom. You give up part of your labor, part of your taxes, which is your freedom. And once again, this is not an argument for no government, but this is an argument for minimizing how much of your labor or how much of your freedom you give up. So there's an efficiency argument for minimizing government, but there's also a freedom or a liberty argument for it. The bottom line is, once we get to this, is it good or bad to raise taxes? If it's bad to raise it on everybody, I think it's bad to raise it on some people. And just to vilify them to say, oh, well, they're rich people, that's why we should do it, really doesn't make any economic sense. Then we get to the practical matter. Will it work? If we raise tax rates, will we get more revenue? If you want more revenue for government, will we get it if we raise rates? Maybe, maybe not. There's historic examples on both sides. If you look in the 1920s, the top rate was 73%. We lowered it to 28%, and we had a boom throughout the 20s. We got more revenue, and the rich people paid a higher percentage of their taxes. We did it again in the 60s under Kennedy. Unemployment was cut in half. We got more revenue again, and once again, the rich paid a higher percentage of the revenue. We did it under Reagan. We lowered rates again. We got economic growth. Unemployment was cut, and we got more revenue, and the rich paid a higher percentage. So even if you want the rich to pay more, maybe you should lower their rates. And if there's facts that argue in this way, should we just give up on the facts because the president won the election? I don't think so. The facts didn't change. He won. He didn't do so well in Kentucky, but he did win. But there are many examples. And then people will point to, and they say, well, under Clinton, we had higher rates. All he wants is Clinton's rates. Well, under Clinton, we were in the middle of a huge boom. The commercialization of the internet was new, the dot-com boom. We eventually had a bubble that burst there, but we had a huge boom going on. In the middle of a boom, if you're growing at 7%, your economy annually, maybe you raise taxes a little bit, you get more revenue. What if your economy is growing at 1%? What did the president tell us 2 years ago? When he agreed to extend the Bush tax cuts for a year or two, he said, oh, well, we're growing so slow and raising taxes would be bad for the economy. Our economy is growing slower than it was at that point, but now he's changed his tune because he's won this election. He has this mandate to go after rich people. So half of the fiscal cliff is taxes. And I think it's a muddled message because They say raising taxes is a bad idea on the one hand, but then they say raising taxes a little bit's a good idea. I don't think that's consistent.